Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first podcast episode of Left of Old North. I'm your host, Adrian, and with me today
is CJ.
We got a lot of shit to talk about, let's be honest. This so-called hurricane relief bill was passed through the House after the governor tried to veto it, and then they went back, voted on it again, and overrode the veto. And we're going to talk about how the sweeping power changes have just completely corrupted this whole system for the incoming Democratic regime. We're also going to talk about the legislative fallout from that and some other stuff that's happening in Wake County right now that should severely piss off union members. But first up, how are you doing today, CJ?
I'm good. Just, getting ready for the holidays. How about you?
Same. I've got to be honest, the holidays feel a little sour this week for a number of reasons. Fair. We're coming off the heels of a pretty bad election. Maybe not so much in North Carolina, because we actually managed to get some Republicans out of office. So just to recap for all those who weren't paying attention, the Republicans did have a supermajority in the House legislature, and Democrats overturned that this year. Well, by a margin of 1 seat. But hey, a W's a W. We'll take it.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, Kamala Harris did lose by more of a percentage of the vote than Joe Biden did in 2020. We were hoping for a little bit of a closer race, and Donald Trump ended up taking that quite handily. What was your reaction on that night?
I was up till, probably about, 3 or so in the morning. Just, kind of watching the news, in bed, family is asleep and everything. And part of me was just like, oh, God. To break that to folks, how am I gonna tell them, hey, guess what we have to live through again?
Yeah. Oh my God. Right. Oh my God.
And then I think another part of it was I kind of went from that disbelief and everything to this rage, this anger, all the kind of stages of grief that there are. And then I was kind of like, okay, screw it. You know what? I'm going to be mad. You know what? I should probably get used to that feeling for the next 4 years. But I'm not going to be mad and not do anything. Yeah. I have never been someone who likes to kind of sit on the sidelines and watch things happen. If I see that there's something bad going on, I try to get involved and try to help mitigate whatever damage that there is, help kind of alleviate whatever suffering may be happening, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so that's one reason, I kind of came to you with this idea. I'm like, hey, how about this? Because, the one thing that the world needs is another couple of white dudes with a podcast.
But hey, at least we're self-aware, and at least we are trying to combat it from the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, exactly. And I just, like I said, a lot of it was disbelief, shock, anger. And then, I kind of sat around for a week or so, not really watching the news, not really watching TV, kind of using it as a period of self-reflection. Just kind of okay, well, that happened. What's next? Playing through all the scenarios in my head of what the next 4 years could look like.
Political cleanser of sorts.
Yeah, exactly.
When we both needed it, I think. So just a little clarification for anyone listening to this. CJ and I both were running house races here in North Carolina. We were both on the ground talking to voters every single day. We were managing campaign funds, endorsements, the websites, the freaking social media. We were doing freaking everything. We're not just two dudes talking. We have plenty of contacts and plenty of people that know much more in depth than we do about some of these things, but also we were here experiencing it in real time, talking with members of the coordinated campaign out here in North Carolina for the Harris-Walz campaign. So we're this hits a little bit harder for both of us than I think for some people. Not to, rain on anybody's parade and say, oh, well, my pain's worse, but I had a few too many shots that night. Because I just needed to numb the pain. But enough about our problems. Let's talk about the problems for everybody else. in this state, in this old north state of ours. Right up at the top of this, we were talking about SB 382. Now, CJ, here's a little trivia question for everybody in the audience. Is this actually a hurricane relief bill?
No. It is a hurricane relief bill in name only, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to really kind of get into it, I forget how many pages long the bill is, but I think only like 15 pages. That's right. 132 pages long. I think maybe 15 pages were even talking about Hurricane Helene and relief and all that stuff. What this really is a partisan, a Republican, let's just call it for what it is, power grab. If we want to talk about the actual hurricane relief aspect of things, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, none of the funds that they voted on are actually going to be used immediately for Hurricane Helene relief. Essentially, it gets put into another account that can be accessed like next year. And I don't think it's actually earmarked for Hurricane Helene relief. Now, I could be wrong, but...
So I don't know if it was necessarily earmarked for just hurricane relief, but what I do know is that this money didn't just poof from nowhere. They didn't invent new funds. They literally just took funds from somewhere else and pushed it over here from already existing funds. And it can't even be used until much later. So it's not something that required such urgency. And let's keep in mind this bill was passed at the very last session of the North Carolina legislature this year, literally into the afternoon hours.
Yeah,
they were supposed to meet up at 10:30, I think it was, at 11, and then they immediately called a recess, and then met back up at 3 p.m., did the order of the day, voted on 3 things, and then left.
Yeah.
And that, would you say that's an accurate statement of like the cliff notes of what happened?
Yeah. No, it really is. I mean, they were supposed to meet up, they called a recess, and then I think it got delayed one more time that day, if I'm not mistaken. And, they reconvened late afternoon-ish.
Yeah. But see, that's the thing, right? We're giving the sanitized version of what happened. But we were both there that day. And
yes, we were.
And we slogged through 2 different sessions where nothing happened. And we had to show up again in the afternoon when they met up to vote on this thing, and there were hundreds of protesters there.
Yep.
Hundreds.
And there seemed to be just more and more coming in, like by the minute. Just in the morning, whenever I got there, I was actually probably one of the first people who was there, just because I don't know, I like to be places early.
Yeah. It's going to a protest and going to the airport early. You gotta get there like 2 hours early.
Exactly. And I like I said, I like to get places early, so I showed up a little bit early. And of course, there was kind of these stragglers, or maybe not stragglers, but these early birds just showed up. Maybe about half a dozen at one point, and then quickly, just people started pouring in. At one point I went into the restroom, came back out, and I swear it had tripled in size. It was, like you said, hundreds of people just standing there outside the gallery. And for those of you who haven't been to the General Assembly building, it's 3 floors really. So you have, the 3rd floor that has the galleries where you can watch the proceedings of the House and the Senate. And then a 2nd floor, which if you're looking down from outside the gallery, you can see down into. And then the 1st floor where you enter, but we don't care about that one right now. But the 3rd floor, the 2nd floor, both were just filled with protesters saying, uphold the veto, this bill is a sham, stop the power grab, all this stuff. I don't think I saw one single person saying, oh yeah, override the veto.
Yeah.
I will say, I think the state party has done an absolutely incredible job, or did an absolutely incredible job in getting the word out about this bill, about this veto, about this vote, all that stuff, and just educating the public on how blatant of a power grab it is, and how little it does for actual hurricane relief.
Let's keep in mind that this is only, it's going to sound like a high number, but this is only $200 million for hurricane relief. That's what this bill contained as part of the hurricane relief funds, was about $200 million. To put that into context, okay, this bill also contained within it a part that gave $500 million in school vouchers to private schools. So there were double the amount of funds available for parents who wanted to send their kids to private school, to have that all paid for courtesy of the North Carolina voters, but only a measly $200 million for the people of Western North Carolina and the devastation that has happened there. That's what we're dealing with here, because they're gonna have there was a representative there, and you might need to help me out here because I can't on the nose remember his name.
I cannot remember either. I think I know your.
I posted on Blue Sky about him, and by the way, go follow us on Blue Sky if you're listening to this. We recorded and reported on this while it was happening in real time. So there are a couple of posts from me like, we're getting kicked out as we were getting funneled out. But anyway, so there was, they each got 10 minutes to speak, and there was a guy who got up and spoke, one of the representatives there, that just took up so much time. And all he could talk about was how his home or his land was getting washed away by Hurricane Helene. For 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, he just kept going on and on and on. And to me, this really signified and it exemplified exactly where the bill was couching itself. Within this emotional response to Helene, within this feeling amongst Western North Carolinians that, hey, we have to do something now and the government's not helping us. Republicans seeing that as a way to push through legislation on the basis of these people need help now, knowing that most people in that area of the state would probably not have any idea how those funds were going to help them, if at all.
Yeah. And if I may take just a second. So,
of course,
a little bit for the audience. I was born and raised in Western North Carolina. I grew up in Rutherford County, which is where Lake Lure, Chimney Rock is. So I know you probably saw it on the news. You know, these are towns that get completely washed away. Luckily, they're rebuilding, thank God. And I was fortunate enough that, you know, all my family and my friends, they're all fine. But the thing to keep in mind about that part of the state, and again, this as someone who grew up in Appalachia, I mean, I'm actually wearing my App State hoodie right now. But as someone who grew up in Appalachia, Western North Carolina has been historically ignored and taken advantage of by both sides of the aisle. I'll just say it for years. The infrastructure there is not what it should be. The jobs there are not what they should be. You know, back in the day, there were plenty of jobs. You know, we had like textile mills, we had furniture factories, all this stuff. And then, you know, 90s came around, a lot of them, you know, left the country, left the city, state. At least to my knowledge, and just based off my experience, there hasn't seemed to be a huge effort to kind of alleviate that loss, right? And I should also say, just kind of as a side note, again, these are the mountains of North Carolina right here. You know, we get snowstorms. You know, we get a few inches of snow every year that we can, you know, plow our way out of and take care of, no problem. We don't get hurricanes. Our buildings are not built to a hurricane code like you would find out at the coast or like you would find down in Florida or Alabama or wherever, because there's no need for it, you know? And so one of the many reasons the damage was so bad is just because we don't get hurricanes. We don't build for them.
Right.
And, you know, we're, 2 months out at this point from the hurricane? 3 months?
Yeah, about 3 months.
Yeah. And there are still people who don't have a place to go. There are still people who are having to live in tents and, you know, sleep in sleeping bags and all this stuff on a nightly basis. They don't, you know, have jobs. They don't have the ability to go get a hotel for the night. And I mean, not to say they would even be able to, because they're, you know, already taken.
Yeah.
It's December and it is cold in Western NC. I was out there for Thanksgiving seeing, you know, family, and I drove past Old Fort. I didn't go into Old Fort proper, but for those of you who don't know, it's like a really small town, not too far from Asheville, and it got absolutely rocked. It was basically wiped off the map. And just from the highway, you could see the trees down, you can see the devastation. And knowing that there are people in these areas that aren't getting the help that they need already breaks my heart. And to see that the Republicans in North Carolina passed this bill, or, you know, we're trying to pass this bill under the guise, there we go, of hurricane relief, pisses me off to no end. Again, that part of the state has had a long history of being taken advantage of by the government. And this is just one more example of using it to its advantage and using it as a scapegoat almost. It is using the suffering of good, amazing people. And, I might not agree with them on politics a lot, but they're still, they're still my people. They're still my kin, let's say.
Sure, yeah.
And to see them, again, taking advantage of like this, taking advantage of, just to perpetrate a power grab.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it pisses me off to no end, and it is inexcusable, it's unconscionable. And everyone who voted for this bill should be ashamed. Yes. They really should.
Which is why and I did look him up, Representative Dudley Green from House District 85, he spoke for 13 minutes. Right. And I was wrong before. It was that each legislator got 5 minutes to speak. He went way over time, even if other Republicans were giving him time. And like I said, during the time that he was talking, he spoke a lot like you did, right? It probably did come from the heart. I don't think anybody would question that. But the problem is that what it's being used for and how they're using it is very emotional. It is very impactful to a lot of people, millions of people, in fact, if you count families and the economy coming from Western North Carolina. But here's the problem. Within the same breaths, he fails to talk about all the other things that are in this bill. He failed to address all the other budgetary movements in this bill. But he had plenty of time at the end of his speech to personally congratulate Tim Moore for winning a House seat, and made sure to congratulate him and wish him well in Washington to continue the good work he's been doing here. And I just gotta say, let's hope he doesn't.
Yeah.
Because if we know anything about Tim Moore, and unfortunately we do, he is kind of the face of this whole power grab, oligarchical movement of the Republican Party here in North Carolina.
Yeah, no, very much so.
We've got a despicable wing of this party that is hell-bent on continuing the destruction of any kind of democratic means of equal representation. They don't want it.
Yeah.
And you can see that. I mean, okay, so right before they did this vote, as is normal, I'm not saying this was out of the ordinary, there was a committee meeting amongst all the legislators. Once they were done, I even saw Tricia Cotham in person, walk right by me. I was like, oh, look, there she is. In the flesh. And when all was said and done, I think that in these committee meetings or wherever they were talking, there was a concerted effort to make some of the legislators, the Republican legislators that initially voted against it, we're going to vote with the Republicans and override the veto.
Yeah.
And I want to know what happened in those back rooms, what was said to these guys, because it wasn't just one or two people. There were three of them, three Republicans that all changed their vote right at the last minute to override this veto.
Yep.
So these three representatives were Mark Pless, Carl Gillespie, and Mike Clampett. They were the ones that flipped their votes. And then we can't leave out Representative Cecil Brockman out of Guilford County.
Yeah.
I think I remember. And he attributes this to being sick. He prioritized his health. And then he said, in the second paragraph of his official statement, the depravity of the establishment within the NC Democratic Party knows no bounds. After gathering the strength to share with the world about my struggle with mental health, the party sent angry mobs after me. And here's the thing, the party didn't send angry mobs after him. We were there on the ground. There were many activists not affiliated with the NC Democratic Party that were giving his number out to every single person that they could, urging him to come and vote on this bill.
Yep.
And he did
100. Yeah. And we can't pretend that this isn't a pattern with him, because it very much is. Mm-hmm. One of the things he's known for, his MO really, is missing key votes, or, going and taking a walk or whatever. And, we can speculate as to the reasons why.
Plausible deniability, right?
Yeah, but it's inexcusable. I mean, you call yourself a Democrat. Now we can, again, theorize what that is, whether or not you actually are, or whether you just call yourself that because, if you're a Republican, you couldn't get elected in your district as is.
Right. Let's keep in mind to everybody out there that the reason there was a concern. So even in his statement, he says, after wasting more than $500,000 on a failed Democratic primary to defeat me, the state Democratic Party still clearly does not respect the will of the voters in District 60. Again, because he would not win otherwise.
Right. And I think one thing that he needs to keep in mind is, I don't know the actual numbers off the top of my head, but his opponent in the primary came pretty close to beating him.
Yeah, let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, because that race was one of the ones that was targeted by some of the groups here in North Carolina for sure, because they know what he is like and what he does.
Mm-hmm. And give anybody that's listening to this a little bit of a rundown on, like, it might just seem like we're bullying this guy, right? But this is, like you said, this is a pattern with him.
Yeah, and let me take a step back really quick and just say this. He has talked about his struggles with mental health, and I do applaud him for that. I really do.
Sure.
I know that it's something that can be very difficult to open up about and very difficult to deal with, especially when a public figure like a politician. Kudos for him for being able to come forward and talk about that. That is actually really good. I applaud him for that.
Yeah.
But as a politician, as a Democrat, he still has a job he needs to do. And I understand that, you should, vote your district, vote your conscience, whatever it is. But I think one thing that needs to be there is vote democratically. And I don't mean like party democratically. I mean vote in the interest in favor of democracy.
Yeah.
Vote for the protection of our institutions. And by being absent, that was one less vote that could have been a statement that could have said what is happening here is unacceptable. Now, again, his vote would not have made the difference, right? But still, in a situation like this, you need all hands on deck. You need as many voices as possible to call this out and to bear witness to what was going on, which is one reason why there were so many people there that day, is because they wanted to bear witness to everything that was happening.
Right. And here's the thing. He's acting in this statement that he made, that like there's some clear mandate for leadership, that the voices of his district were heard, that there was a clear indication they wanted him specifically to represent them. Let's be clear, 85 voters were the ones that made the difference. Cecil Brockman won his primary election by 85 votes. That's it. His Democratic challenger, James Adams, man, he ran a pretty damn good campaign. I'm going to be honest. I went and clicked around on all of his stuff. Like, he was going after, and kudos to him. And here's the thing. Primaries are not indicative of some kind of party apparatus trying to oust you. Healthy primaries are part of why our democracy works. It's part of why we need elections, right? We don't want an uncontested primary. We don't want uncontested general elections every single time, because the general election was a wipeout. He won by 10,000 votes. It wasn't even close. But here's the thing. 33%. A 33-point advantage, rounding out.
Yeah.
Versus a literal 1% difference in the primary election. And people don't really come out and vote in primaries. So the fact that it was this close means, yeah, you have some support, but it's not exactly a mandate.
Exactly.
So it's interesting to me when I read about some of these local politicians that have already gained a reputation for themselves, not as a servant of the community, but as somebody that is a problem for both their party and for their constituents, because they refuse to be a part of the actual bulwark of democracy. Literally refused. And again, we understand. We understand that there is mental health. If there are mental health issues, if there are personal issues, understandable. But don't be mad when the next time, 2 years from now, when you're primaried again, don't be mad when they decide to support somebody else. You are not guaranteed that seat.
Exactly.
And here's the thing, too. He said later, I want to round this off with the last part of his statement on last week's veto override. Oftentimes, I find myself negotiating for what may seem like small but necessary changes that may help to make legislation less problematic. I have even brought back millions in state funds to a poor black community that has never seen it before. To some within the party that claims to care about black people, that isn't enough. Let's keep in mind that his primary opponent was black, and that the millions that he brought back in state funds were granted to him by a Republican supermajority. So clearly this is somebody who has found that rather than working within his structure, that he is going to appease the Republican supermajority. That's why he missed this vote, in my opinion. I can't prove that. I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's my feeling on the matter.
Yeah. I'm not going to say it is, but if it came out that was the case, I would not be surprised. I don't think anyone would really be all that surprised.
Yeah. And this right here, this last bit that he decided to put in this statement, really shows exactly who he is. For those in our party that desire to keep my name in their mouths, let me make it plain and clear for you. Over these next 2 years, you need me. I do not need you. I think that shows exactly where his head's at.
Yep. And I mean,
well, ending it off with watch your mouth when talking about me, and remember your neighbors are watching and listening, especially those in the African American community. I believe that they definitely are, Cecil, and I think that maybe you should take your own advice because people are pissed.
Yeah, no, they are.
And you're absolutely right that the party is going to come back at you with everything they've got because you screwed them over.
Yeah. And I do think it's interesting. I saw this article, I don't know, day before yesterday in the News and Observer. It's essentially a little interview with him talking about the fallout of the bill and his thoughts on, the party and calling him out and whatnot. And essentially, he was alluding to Trisha Cotham's treatment or alleged treatment by the party and how his is very similar and how, kind of leave the door open for a party switch if he wanted to.
Oh yeah, no, Republicans on Twitter love him. There was nothing but adoration and understanding from all of the blue check marks in his replies.
And the thing is, again, the area he's from, High Point, it's a very blue area. If he were to switch parties, he would not stand a chance at re-election, and he knows it, which is the only reason why he, in my opinion, he hasn't yet.
No, I think that's a pretty fair statement. It's a tactical move on his part. It's strategic thinking. I think that he brands himself as an outsider. He brands himself as somebody who goes against the grain. But man, you ain't no AOC. This is not the same thing.
Agreed.
This is like, I do what's best for my constituents, even if that means pushing their boat down the river. It's ridiculous. Anyway, moving on, because I think we've kept him in our mouths, as he put it, for long enough. So we've talked about all that. We've talked about the fallout of SB 382, that this is going to have extenuating circumstances for what's to come in North Carolina. Chris Cooper?
Yeah, the Western Carolina professor, right?
Yes, and he was talking about, do you think, they were interviewing him and they were asking, do you think that this is one of the most consequential bills that's ever been passed? And he said, without a doubt, this is the most consequential bill in modern North Carolina history. And I just think when you have somebody who is very aware of the situation politically, legislatively in North Carolina, somebody that's been studying it for many years, says that this is not just some one-off bill that we can forget about in a couple of years. This is going to have huge consequence moving forward. Yep. They've effectively crippled the governor. They've effectively crippled the attorney general, the secretary of state. I mean, they moved the elections to the state auditor's office, which makes absolutely no sense. The only silver lining in this is that the incoming governor, Josh Stein, and the outgoing governor, Governor Cooper, are going to be, or have already filed suit against this and up to a higher court. But in the meantime, we're all just sitting here biting our nails and waiting for some good news. Speaking of good news, in one of the closest elections in the entire country, Allison Riggs still appears to have won her seat on the appeals court, and Jefferson Griffith is still fighting it tooth and nail.
Yep.
It's actually pretty crazy how many times somebody has to lose in order to be told that they are a loser.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It really is. This is what I'm about to say happened yesterday, and of course, being North Carolina politics, things move quickly. But yesterday, he was asking the Republican majority state Supreme Court to throw out 60,000 votes. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, I saw that and I was just like, oh, good God. Because, this is what the modern GOP is now. They don't like the results. So they try and they sue their way to victory to undermine the people.
Mm-hmm.
All because they don't know how to let go of power. And it's pathetic. And it's just another example of how the GOP, both North Carolina and nationally, doesn't actually care about democracy. They care about their power.
Yeah.
They care about their own self-interests.
They have a party of petty rules lawyers, people that want to win within the margins. They want to win within the footnotes and the loopholes. Because, like I said earlier, a W is a W,
Yeah.
We can talk about how the Electoral College sucks. We can talk about how throwing out perfectly valid ballots. But if they get away with it, we don't have much recourse to argue, right? Yep. Something that has been stirring in the back of a lot of people's minds that, I talked to people pretty much every day about stuff like this. And something that continuously comes up in conversation is, well, what can we do? Well, what can we do? Well, first off, if you're just asking now, and this is not to belittle people, but if you're just asking now, it's a little too late, and you should have been asking months ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've this has been years in the making for the North Carolina GOP. This is years and years and years of planning. You need to get involved, you need to be aware, and you need to be supportive of the people that are actually going to make systemic change here in this state. And hey, if you hate the National Democrats, fine. You know, there's a lot of people across this state that cannot stand some of the Democrats that have been elected nationally. But if you care about what's happening in this state, if you consider yourself left of the current Democratic establishment, hey, we've got plenty of people here that are running way left of where the current GOP is.
Yeah.
So you can't just sit around and wait for people to change it for you.
No, you can't. You can't. You have to take action. You have to. There is a lot you can do, and one of the most important things is to stay plugged in. You know, these things. Miss Rachel is saying ball.
Oh.
So ball.
You can start off if you want.
Yeah. What was this? Yeah. No, so there is a lot of stuff that you can do. We would love to have had you involved, a few months ago, but it is what it is. Yeah. Welcome to the party, at least.
Yeah.
Go volunteer with your county party. Volunteer with the party. One of the most important things, in my opinion, that you can do is stay informed. Stay in tune to everything going on. Because politics in general, and North Carolina politics especially, gets insanely convoluted insanely quickly at times.
Oh, yeah. It gets really messy really fast, and it can be really hard to follow it if you don't know who to listen to or where to look for this information. Like when I first came here, that was the main problem for me. It's like, I don't know what the is going on. There's like all these different people. There's all like, oh, don't listen to Carolina Journal because they're actually bought out by a Republican and they are very biased in their reporting. And then I'm like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize. And then you're like, well, some Democrats aren't actually Democrats, and here's who aren't Democrats. And then sure enough, Tricia Cotham switches, and I'm like, oh, well, there it is. And so it's not really as straightforward as people would love to believe. And as we just witnessed with Cecil Brockman and that whole breakdown, there are plenty of people who love to play outside the bounds because it brings them some notoriety.
Yeah.
Including Republicans. There are plenty of Republicans that love to go against the grain of the Republican establishment, but then when it really comes down to it, they will vote with them almost every single time.
Yep. And I will say, once you do get in tune with everything, and once you get involved with, the party and fighting back against everything that's happening, make sure you still take time to look after yourself, right? Because we got midterms in 2 years, we got a presidential election in 4 years.
Heck, we've got 4 years. We've got municipal elections this upcoming year.
Yeah, that's right. We got municipals coming up. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening, and this is one of those situations where it is very much a marathon and not a sprint. Pace yourself. Take a break when you need to, but get back in.
Yeah. There are elections every single year, and it is extremely important to, if not to be informed about, like, as much as you can be informed about who's on your, because there were people that won, that in my county, there were people that won that we supported that probably would not have won if we didn't get out the vote and we didn't actually talk to people and explain to them who these folks were, because some of these races are complete unknowns. People have no idea who they are, or maybe they saw their sign on the side of the road and they just go on about their day after voting. Doesn't affect them at all.
Exactly.
And here's the thing, in that county, in my county, we swung 2 points to the left this year. That has never happened. Not since the 1970s has that happened. Yeah. There is a shift that is happening, but the problem is that people are so disillusioned and so tired of having to fight back against this power structure here in North Carolina that, by the way, is only about 15 years old. The GOP has not had this much of a power grip in a very, very long time. But it's not that old, and there are still always time to turn it around. You can't sit here and mope and wait for things to get better. Sorry, that was my big spiel.
No, you're right.
And like one little thing that I'll keep in here as well is that we know everybody has jobs, and a lot of the times you come to these events, right, where or these protests, and you'll see a lot of people who you have a feeling they are either retired or they are unemployed, and that is very true. there are a lot of those. But it really is how much does this matter to you? How important is this to you?
Yeah. So I think one thing that is very important, and you kind of talked about this for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I think people need to really educate themselves on all the offices on the ballot. I get it. You know what? Soil water commissioner might not sound interesting, but you know what? It still has an effect.
What, you don't think the soil and water commissioner isn't sexy?
I mean, I do, but that's because I'm a nerd. But, you know, as you said at the top of this, I managed a state house race this year. And at one point, they were going over provisional ballots, all that stuff. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go out and watch this process because I had never watched it before. I hadn't really thought about watching it. And it was me and the County Board of Elections, which was, I think, 6 people maybe. That sounds about right. And 4 people from the public just watching. And, you know, they were going around handing each other provisional ballots, you know, saying, okay, yes, this should count. No, this shouldn't count. This is why, so on and so forth. You know what? Some of these positions are elected. And sometimes the decision to have your ballot counted, to have your voice heard, comes down to half a dozen people in a random room somewhere. I guarantee you, if you go to a random person on the street and you say, hey, who is on your county board of elections? Who's on state board of elections? They would not be able to tell you.
Hell, most people couldn't tell you who their state senator or state representative, the people who actually make the direct. Most people couldn't tell you who their county commissioners are. And you should definitely know who your county, because those are the dudes that decide a lot more than you probably.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not saying that to, you know, I'm not calling anyone dumb or uninformed or anything like that.
No, of course. Well, maybe uninformed, but not dumb.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But
we are all busy with, you know, we all have stuff going on. And you know what? People don't always have the time to sit down and again say, okay, who is running for dog catcher, essentially, you know? But that doesn't mean it's not important to do so.
Right. And they design it that way. You know, it is purposefully sometimes designed to be obtuse. To be,
no, I agree.
Yeah, to be exclusive to the people who the intention is to make it confusing.
Yeah, agreed. 100%.
Okay, so for our last little bit here, in calls to action, just recently, this was about 5 days ago, but just recently, the head union organizer for a group that's trying to establish a union in the Amazon warehouse in Garner was fired and is claiming wrongful termination. And I mean, this is a tale as old as time. We will continue to see for years to come, I'm sure. If you ever needed more understanding of what these folks go through, Garner has a huge Amazon warehouse. I mean, it's massive. And most of all of the shipments come through there because it's so close to Wake County. They have hundreds and hundreds of employees, and they're not being paid enough for what they're doing. I mean, I think that most people could agree with that. And this is, again, like I said, it's a tale as old as time, because once they actually start arguing for more benefits, for better pay, they find a reason to fire them, to keep them scared. Yep. And this has broader implications for unionizing efforts in the rest of North Carolina. Because this isn't just here, this is happening all over the country for Amazon warehouse workers specifically. And this is yet another reason why there should be unions, especially in Amazon warehouse. They terminated this guy 10 days before the holiday, before Christmas. 10 days for arguing for better pay for his work.
Like you said, this is all just as a means of intimidation. It really is.
Yeah.
You know, the Amazon business model, from my understanding, has always been essentially, you know, they actually encourage high turnover.
Yeah.
You know, because then they don't have people who are there long enough to justify giving raises to. They don't have people there long enough to, you know, promote and, you know, move up in the company and all this stuff. They can just, you know, fire them or have them quit because of, you know, bad working conditions, and bring in someone else who will hopefully be gone in 6 weeks or 6 months.
Right.
And, you know, North Carolina has a history of, you know, labor unions. I'm reading a book called The Paradox of the Tar Heel State, Paradox of North Carolina.
If you want to do some book recommendations on this podcast, I think it's great. I think we should.
Yeah. But, you know, they talk about how, like, back in, like, the 1920s and whatnot, unions were a big thing here. or at least pushes for unions were big. So that's the 10 as old as time in this state. And for as long as there's been unions, really, there's been pushback because the people at the top, God forbid, they give up, an extra $1,000.
Right.
Or extra $1 million, which when you're someone like Jeff Bezos, you make up in like literally a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great TikTok video I just saw this week where it showed in real time one of the Amazon, or no, it wasn't Amazon, it was Blue Origin, one of the Blue Origin workers, his own space project, his version of SpaceX, what he makes per second. And it had like a running clock or a running ticker of how much each one of them was making, and he in the time that the video played, he made $53,000.
Yeah. This is the book I was talking about. Yeah, The Paradox of Tar Heel Politics is by Rob Christensen. Fantastic book. But no, it's
I'll add that to our official book list.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
You just wait. They'll put official Left of Old North stickers on these books at some point. It'll be like Oprah's book club level. Be like,
hey, that works.
Hey, officially sanctioned.
God.
Sorry, well, I got you off track there.
No, you're good. No, I mean, it really is still as old as time. And there's no excuse for it. I mean, it is not that hard to treat people with respect and dignity and to pay them not just a fair wage, but a actual living wage. Mm-hmm. If we want to get into it,
that's what this is for. We got to get into it.
Yeah. When FDR was talking about the minimum wage and everything, he didn't just call it a minimum wage. He called it a living wage. The whole point of it was to keep up with the times, to keep up with the economy, to keep up with inflation. And, you have right now this whole, the fight for 15, I think, is what a lot of people call it. Mm-hmm. It's closer now, if you want to keep up with like inflation, a little bit closer, like $25, $30 an hour.
Yeah, I think the last estimate that I saw was $19.50. Should have been the minimum wage at this point, and that's probably changed by now because I don't know if you saw, but the Fed has lowered rates again, and market confidence has dropped very quickly. So we're headed for worse times, folks, and get ready because Trump's about to break the economy with tariffs.
Yep. But it's not that difficult to treat people fairly, and I know I'm not the only one who thinks this, but there's no such thing as an ethical billionaire.
No, absolutely not.
Like Bezos and Musk and all them, they have made their money either through slavery, like emerald mines in South Africa, let's say, or
just a random example.
But they've either made their billions through that, or through inheritance and not having to work for anything, or having to be in the right place or at the right time, or most commonly if advantage of everyday people who are just trying to put food on the table. That's it, And I will say, if anyone tries to come after this and say, oh, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all that bullshit. No, the fact is the way things are currently, being able to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps is no longer a possibility. As the economy stands, as the number of jobs stands, and as the state of the working class stands, that's not possible.
Yeah, and I think with this recent CEO drama, let's call it. I mean, we could go on for a whole nother hour about that. We can probably wait until next episode to talk about that. If you want to tune in, we'll talk a little bit more about the class warfare, about the widening gap of income equality, and all these other things. But just to kind of cap off this little space of it, here in North Carolina, we have some areas that are very, very high in poverty, high in homelessness, high in income inequality, and that applies to, kind of like CJ was saying, a lot of Western North Carolina, the Appalachian area, and a lot of Eastern North Carolina, the swampy area. I mean, these folks, and I was in East North Carolina for my race. These folks are getting by, and that's pretty good for what they have right now. And they'll tell you that themselves. They have been largely ignored by the Piedmont. They have largely been ignored by Raleigh. And the problem is that a lot of them continue to think that Republicans are going to answer their prayers. And the problem is they're not going to. I'm not necessarily saying the Democrats are going to either, but I'm also saying that just because the majority party has some leverage to be able to do what they're going to do doesn't mean that they're going to do it for you.
Right.
So there's this great book by Timothy Snyder that I will add to the book list called On Tyranny. I've got my little handbook version here. There's a larger version of the book that has a lot more lessons in it. But one of the first lessons that has been repeated on the internet post this election was from the first lesson: do not obey in advance. And that applies as well to legislative races. Just because someone has the power does not necessarily mean that you should kowtow to them and subject yourself to them and what they plan to do. You still need to fight for what you believe.
Exactly.
Don't fight for the scraps. Fight for the turkey. You deserve that turkey, man. You deserve, even though not. I think turkey's kind of on its way out as far as Thanksgiving is concerned. You notice a lot of people didn't really cook.
Yeah. No,
agreed. A lot of conversation about turkeys this year.
I'm big Carolina, but I think, don't kowtow to them. And I think, to me, one of the most patriotic things you can do as a citizen of this country, as a citizen of this state, is criticize and call out the government for what not by doing that. That doesn't mean, you hate North Carolina or you hate the U.S. or anything like that. No, by doing that, you are saying, hey, I want this to be better. I want us to progress as a country. I want us to be stronger as a country, as a state. So, you know what? Yeah, go make your voice heard. And if you see some bullshit like, these power grabs, call them out for what they are. Go pack the gallery. Go bear witness so that those people who are passing those votes know that they're not doing it in secret.
Right.
Go there so that they know that they are being watched and that they are being called out.
Yeah.
And eventually they will have to suffer whatever those electoral consequences are.
And some of them won't, and that's why they do it with impunity. We know that just based on the district lines that have been drawn, people will always pretend as though this state is a majority Republican state, and they might be right, but they would also be wrong in thinking that it is an overwhelming majority.
Yeah, it is very much, in my opinion, a purple state. It really is. It is still a swing state. It is. Somebody
described it to me as a polka dot state. Like we've got different pockets of blue, different pockets of red, even pockets of blue in places where you think it'd be red, and then pockets of red where you think it'd be blue. It's all these different little...
No, I can see that. And I will say, for those, going back a few minutes, for those who are pissed off and want to do something, again, vote. In 2026, we got state Supreme Court elections coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you go vote for those people who will uphold fair election maps, because those maps aren't getting drawn again until 2030, and the U.S. Supreme Court has said that maps are a state issue.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you think that will go to? That will go to the state Supreme Court. So make sure you go vote for people who actually give a fuck. Sorry,
I can believe it.
Make sure you go vote for people who actually care about democracy and care about fair representation.
Right.
Including our judges.
Yeah, because right now the courts are bought. Right now the legislature is pretty much has a power hold on everything. And the Senate, I heard it from Senator Bobby Hoenig, Republican out of East North Carolina himself. The Senate really doesn't do that much. The Senate's just kind of a rubber stamp on whatever the House wants to do. Very rarely does a Senate bill make as much of an impact, and this is one of those rare instances, but the Senate has an overwhelming majority of Republicans as well. Mm-hmm. And that's where all of this gets so twisted, right? Because we should have a more representative democracy. We should have a more representative form of government where it's a little more equal, and then, we don't have these packed and cracked areas where you're dividing black voters from majority white voters, and these eastern areas where clearly this district or this county should not be muddled in with the rest because they don't have the same electoral goals. They don't care. Right. They're going to do whatever they can to slice and dice so that they can win seats, because that's ultimately what matters. And this is when we're coming from the perspective, obviously the channel name is Left of Old North. We take a pretty nuanced approach here. We are on the left end of the spectrum, but we're pretty open about the fact that we're Democrats. And this is not going to be a show where we completely stooge for the Democrats, but we are fully aware that in this state specifically, our path to getting out of this Republican chokehold is voting in Democrats.
Yeah, exactly. It's
bringing some balance to this damn thing.
Yeah, exactly. And actually being representative of the people, and we could have fair maps, and maybe we still end up with a majority Republican.
I really need people to understand that before these maps were drawn, we had 14 seats of the U.S. House, right? 7 of them were Democrats and 7 of them were Republicans. This year, we now have 11 Republicans, right? 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats going back to Washington. We lost 3 seats. 3. That's insane. That's an incredible drop off. And it's not by accident. It's not like these areas just suddenly switched their vision on what they wanted in a representative. These places were gerrymandered all to hell. A court said in court documents that that they cut up these areas with surgical precision.
You know what? If we get fair maps and it still turns out that there is a majority of Republicans in office, as a Democrat, yeah, that sucks. But at least it's a fair map. At least there was a fair chance. Because you know what? That's how a democracy should be. Everyone should have a actual chance to select the person that they want to have in office.
Right.
And not have it to where the politicians are selecting their voters.
Because we support the people's right to vote. There's nothing wrong with trying to make sure we have a fairer and more sustainable electoral system, even though it's not always ideal. We know that there are problems with democracy. We know there's problems with republicanism, small r republicanism. But when the problem and when the fight from the left end of the spectrum is that you're fighting against a national party that seems hell-bent on trying to just procure and just hold as much power as possible over everybody, and then you have another party that's willing to just continue to compromise on that goal, we're in big red flag territory. Emphasis on red. And unfortunately, not from the more socialist or communist red, because then maybe we would have a little bit more balance, instead of just having culture warriors on Twitter talking about it. We have an issue here where this state, you're right, is very purple by many standards, by many metrics. We just elected a Democratic governor by a wide margin. And that's not just because, and people love to argue that this is because Mark Robinson is one of the worst Republican candidates that has ever run for governor in this state. But I would put it to you that that's simply not true, because 4 years before this, Governor Roy Cooper won his second term, and he's not even even in modern North Carolina politics, he's not the first Democratic governor that won by a large margin.
Right.
It's not unheard of in other states as well to have a split ticket between the president and the Democratic or the Republican governors. I mean, just look at Maryland. They had Larry Hogan forever. Well, not forever, for as long as they're allowed to. But you get my point. We have a situation where we have people online, we have people in public spaces that are calling for the overturning of elections simply on the basis that split ticketing exists. The fact, I can't believe that Trump won by so many points here in North Carolina and then we still got a Democratic governor. There's no way. That can't be happening. Okay. Well, you just fundamentally don't understand how any of this works then, I guess.
No, split ticket voting is the North Carolina pastime. It really is.
I'm sure that's also talked about in the Paradox of Tar Heel Politics.
Yeah.
Go get it on Amazon. Wait, no, don't go get it on Amazon.
Exactly. Now, I remember growing up, my grandma, she would never tell me who she voted for because, that was the thing with her generation. Don't tell people who you voted for.
Yeah, it's your own personal business.
But she would tell me, she would vote for a mix. She said she, on the same ticket as voted for Democrats, she has voted for Republicans. And, she's mentioned that her family, her dad did the same thing.
Yeah.
This isn't anything new to politics, especially in North Carolina. It's just the reality of how things are.
Yeah, exactly. And we are kind of distilling it down to its base presentation, but that's essentially there's no hard and fast rules for anything here. I think is the motif of this episode is there are no rules except the ones you make up, and they will try to change the rules, so you better damn well know them. So to kind of wrap this up, again, got to go out and vote. And not just mull over and brood over the results of the last election, but you got to go out and vote. You got to go get involved. Hell, if you're somebody who's a little bit more of a socialist than we are, if you're somebody who's more of a communist, someone else here in North Carolina that is more to the left than we are, we encourage you to get involved in your Democratic Party and to listen and to understand and strategize, because your thoughts and your opinions do matter, but you cannot go in and immediately just start trying to shake things up, because they will sniff you out real fast, and we've seen people get ostracized because of that. Be tactical, be informed, and stay active.
Yeah. And I that's something that we should talk about in another episode at some point, is the role that third parties play in North Carolina, and the, how should I put this? The lack of on their part.
The lack of what?
Wins, victories.
Oh, yeah.
Part. And we can talk about why that is, at least in my opinion, anyway.
No, I don't even think it's an opinion. I think it's just, you don't have any W's on the board. That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's not to say that unaffiliateds can't win. Independents can't win. We've seen it happen.
Yeah.
But when you associate with yourself with an unorganized party that doesn't have a clear message or goal, that's a problem, especially in electoral, in a game where winning matters.
Yeah.
And as we can see, winning very much does matter. So
100.
So just want to round this off by saying thank you for listening. If you made it all the way to the end of the episode, we really appreciate it. There's a lot left to be done. There's no shortage of things to do. So what are you doing while you're listening to us? If you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment on what you think about what we've talked about and what you're doing while you listen to this episode and how you can do more later on. If you have already gotten involved in politics, especially in North Carolina, let us know. And don't make sure to leave the like and subscribe. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Tune in to us on X, Blue Sky, where all podcasts are available, at least the ones that I know about. But thank you for tuning in. CJ, you got anything else to say for our lovely viewers and listeners?
Just, happy holidays, safe travels, all that good stuff.
Happy holidays.
I'm actually going to put a pause right there because she's demanding goldfish.
Fair. Yeah, I would also demand goldfish. I am actually going to keep part of this in, at the end, because I want people to see, hey, we're working dads. This is a reality of politics here.